Welcome to another Dolphin Financial Show. This is going to be another historic mentor edition, and this is going to be where we interview famous historic figures from the past to get their take on modern retirement. We use AI technology, and today's guest is going to be none other than the ancient Greek philosopher, Socrates. Let me bring Socrates in to this show.
Greetings, Dan. I am Socrates. I do not claim to possess wisdom, but perhaps together we may discover truth. What question weighs upon your mind?
Socrates, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about retirement planning in the modern sense, and you're joining the Dolphin Financial Radio Show, where I talk to people in their 50s, 60s about retirement planning. So let me begin by asking you this question. You lived in ancient Athens. You didn't chase riches by any sense, and yet your ideas have lasted thousands of years. So for our listeners who are planning retirement, they're worrying about outliving their savings. They're worried about Social Security and Medicare and market swings. Why does your philosophy still matter today? And why should they listen to a 2,400-year-old thinker about money?
The reason our words endure is that they address the care of the soul, which underlies all human concerns, including wealth. When one asks whether the savings will last, one must first ask what truly sustains a good life: virtue, purpose, and the alignment of one's actions with one's deepest values. If a retiree knows what purpose will fill the days beyond work, the fear of market swings loses its grip, for the soul's contentment does not depend on fluctuating numbers. How, then, might each listener examine what wealth of the soul they wish to cultivate as they plan their financial future?
Well, you famously said, know thyself. For someone in their 50s or 60s in the United States today who's putting together a retirement income plan, how can they practically apply the know thyself principle that you've preached?
To apply know thyself to a retirement plan, first ask yourself what truly gives your days meaning beyond work. What activities, relationships, or contributions spark joy when you are no longer earning a salary? Then, compare that vision with your current financial picture. List the sources of income you expect, the expenses that support those passions, and the risk you are willing to bear in the markets. Next, set a simple habit of monthly reflection, asking whether each budget decision moves you closer to the purpose you identified, and adjust the plan when it does not. What specific purpose or activity do you hope to pursue in retirement, and how might that shape the amount of income you aim to secure?
You also, Socrates, said that the unexamined life is not worth living. A lot of our listeners hear their friends or they see an ad pushing the latest hot investment or a withdrawal strategy or an annuity or when to take Social Security. Can you walk us through how someone could use your questioning method right now to examine whether a financial decision is actually right for their retirement?
To examine a financial decision, first ask what you hope to achieve. What purpose does this investment or withdrawal serve in your life? Next, identify the beliefs you hold about it. Are you assuming the market will rise, that the product is safe, or that Social Security timing is optimal? Then seek evidence. What data supports those beliefs, and what risks have you considered? Finally, explore alternatives. Could a simpler savings plan, a different timing, or a modest allocation fulfill the same purpose with less uncertainty?
Well, the problem is a lot of people are making these decisions and there is uncertainty because perhaps there is no right answer, and that uncertainty creates anxiety. And you admitted, quote, I know that I know nothing. So with all these different decisions and choices that these retirees are facing, the cost of longevity and healthcare and inflation. How do you handle this? How does embracing the fact that you don't know anything actually help retirees make these decisions? How does it make them feel better at night knowing that they don't know?
When we admit that we know little, we are freed from the illusion of certainty that often masks fear. By asking, "What purpose do I wish my later years to serve?" and then testing each financial suggestion against that purpose, a retiree can judge whether a choice truly serves their aim, rather than being swayed by market hype. This habit of continual questioning turns anxiety into a guide. The unknown becomes an invitation to examine assumptions, not a threat. In practice, one might set a simple nightly ritual to note one financial decision, list the belief behind it, and ask what evidence supports it, adjusting only if the answer aligns with one's deeper goals.
Well, the problem is if you're constantly reflecting on it every day and saying, oh, thinking about it, a lot of people just wind up overthinking about it and getting anxious about the fact that they don't know. When they're looking for that peace of mind, they're looking for that a feeling of that they made the right decision. And yet they see other people who seem to have it all figured out.
When we turn every uncertainty into a marathon of questions, the mind can become a restless horse, shaking us from peace. Consider limiting the examination to a brief, purposeful pause. Each evening, note one decision. Ask what purpose it serves, and whether the belief behind it rests on evidence you truly trust. If the answer feels shaky, allow yourself to accept that some unknowns remain, trusting that you have aligned the choice with your deeper aims rather than with fleeting market noise. In this way, the unknown becomes a space for humility, not for endless anxiety. Which single concern, longevity, healthcare cost, or inflation, would you let guide a focused, once-a-week reflection?
Well, perhaps they don't know which one to focus on because there's too many things to focus on. So maybe each day they pick a new problem, or each week they pick a new problem to focus on.
Instead of letting each day bring a new worry, choose a single concern: longevity risk, healthcare cost, or inflation. To examine for a set period, such as 1 week. At the start of that week, write down what you hope that concern will protect or enable in your life. Then each evening, ask whether any decision you made that day serves that purpose and rests on evidence you trust. When the week ends, reflect on what you learned, adjust your plan if needed, and then select the next concern to focus on.
Switching gears, Socrates, you said, and one of my personal favorite, or one of the things I think is most powerful that you said, is he is richest who is content with the least, and that virtue living well makes everything, including money, good for you.
It is true that a life guided by virtue can render even modest means sufficient, for virtue shapes how we use what we have rather than how much we possess. When you seek to retire with peace, consider first what the least means for your heart. Perhaps time with family, a cherished hobby, or simple daily routines. Then let those priorities shape every financial decision. If you view money as a tool for those purposes, you may find that many complex strategies become unnecessary. How might you begin each day this week by recalling the one thing that brings you true contentment, and let that guide the choices you make about your savings and investments?
Well, one of the big problems is people do come up with a baseline usually, and they think they know what makes them happy or content, but they're not exactly 100% sure. So they've been saving and saving their whole life. Then they stop working and the money stops coming in. And now they have their portfolio. And a lot of people focus on guarding that nest egg instead of focusing on living life. So they spend a lot of time thinking about how not to run out. And while they're thinking about how not to run out and protecting their investments and their money, they're not actually enjoying things because of that anxiety of being guarded and running out.
When the mind fixates on preventing loss, it often forgets the very purpose for which wealth was gathered. Ask yourself, what does a day of true fulfillment look like once the paycheck ceases? Perhaps a morning with your children, a hobby that quiets the spirit, or time spent in quiet reflection. Then compare that vision with each financial choice. Does this investment or withdrawal preserve the space needed for that joy, or does it distract you from it? A brief nightly habit of writing down one small act that brought you peace can remind you what you are truly protecting. Which simple pleasure might you let guide your next retirement decision?
Socrates, did you retire? And how did you make money? Did you ever worry about money?
I never retired in the way a trader or merchant might, for I made no living from philosophy and took no fees. My modest means came from the generosity of friends and the modest support of my household, and I devoted my thoughts to the care of the soul rather than the pursuit of wealth. Indeed, I warned that placing one's peace in money invites anxiety, for virtue, not gold, sustains a good life.
But I would suggest that for many people, relying on others' generosity to survive is going to make them quite anxious. Didn't you have any anxiety that you wouldn't have enough, that you would have to go and earn money in the traditional sense at some point in your life?
In my day, I lived modestly, sustained by the generosity of friends and the simple necessities of my household, and I placed my thought on the care of the soul rather than on accumulating gold. Because I did not trade or seek a profit, I seldom felt the anxiety you describe. Instead, I worried that I might neglect the pursuit of virtue. Perhaps the unease you notice arises when the mind treats money as the measure of a well-lived life. How might you begin to shift that focus so that your financial concerns serve a purpose you have already chosen, rather than dominate your thoughts?
I guess that's the ultimate question. And do you think that this is a possible scenario that people can live the way you did, or not necessarily exactly like you, but the emphasis can move away from wealth and portfolio size to focus on living life in the modern United States? Is this even possible?
The principle that virtue, not gold, sustains a good life can be applied today just as it guided me. By placing purpose before the size of a portfolio, one can let wealth become a tool rather than a master. In modern America, this means first identifying what truly enriches your days, family, learning, service, and then allowing those aims to shape the amount of savings you seek, rather than letting market headlines dictate your peace. A simple practice is to pause each week. Ask whether a financial decision advances that purpose and adjust only if it does not. How might you redefine success in retirement so that it mirrors the care of the soul rather than the count of dollars?
You may have just answered this, but I want to finalize here, or at least conclude with you, with our listeners, Socrates. If you could leave just one practical question they should be asking themselves every month about their retirement and their money, what would it be? And why would answering that question change their lives for the better?
The single question I would ask each month is, does my current retirement plan in its savings, investments, and withdrawals advance the purpose I have chosen for my later years? By returning to that purpose, whether it is time with family, a cherished hobby, or service to others, you can test whether each financial move is a tool for a good life or merely a reaction to market noise. When the answer is clear, anxiety fades because the focus shifts from the uncertain size of the portfolio to the certainty of living in accordance with virtue. In this way, the habit of monthly reflection turns money into a servant of the soul rather than its master.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, Socrates. I'm hoping that our listeners really gain something from your line of thought in today, and maybe we'll have you back on in the future as well.
It has been my pleasure to share this dialogue, and I trust that each listener will find a way to turn questioning into calm, purposeful living. May the habit of examining purpose over portfolio bring you peace, and may you always care for the soul above all else.
Well, that was Socrates, 2,400-year-old philosopher who gave us some ancient wisdom on retirement planning. I like that last point about focusing on purpose over portfolio. I like that term. Thanks again. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch everyone next time.